When we started to build Keith's plan, we had to be very deliberate about our assumptions, and so was really comfortable with a more ambitious approach with his pension investments. So we helped him make his dream a reality really, but a secure one by taking a small detour. Imagine being 45, which is not old by the way, and suddenly your health makes you rethink everything. Well, that's where Keith was. In the space of a couple of months, he'd lost two of his really good friends, one in a motorcycle accident and the other to a serious illness out of the blue. His thoughts had turned to his own mortality, as they often do, and as a self-described big lad, he was starting to think really seriously about how long he actually had left. Yes, I know it's pretty depressing and perhaps a little bit macabre to think about it, but at 57, that thought has definitely crossed my mind frequently too, particularly after losing my dad to cancer unexpectedly in 2024. And I know a lot of people younger than me whose mindsets are changing from work to life. So his goal was pretty simple, also very significant: to retire at 57. And remember, he was 45. 12 years is plenty time to make a good difference, especially with some quality advice. He also decided that now would be a really good time to join a gym and start to look after himself a little better. So in his head, 57 gave him at least 20 good years to 77 if all things went to plan. Obviously he hoped he'd live a lot longer than that, but that was what his thinking told him. Now their home situation was actually really interesting in that his partner Sandra had lost her dad a couple of years ago, and her mum had sold the family home and gifted the money to Sandra. They pooled their resources and they converted an old barn into a lovely family home with a separate little annex for mum. Now their purpose for that was really clear: to be there for mum as she grew older and make sure she never felt alone. They also had an honest conversation that one day the barn would eventually just be theirs and they'd probably downsize, so we knew that we could factor this in later life if we needed to. Now just an important note, we were solely focusing on Keith's retirement planning at this stage because they treated their finances separately, which of course is fine, but Sandra did eventually come on board as a client, which was lovely, and we started to manage some of our mum's pensions too, which she'd inherited from Sandra's dad, if you remember. So it really was a family affair, and that's really important. Certainly as a couple, you might view your finances independently, and that's fine, but when you're thinking about retirement together, try and do your financial thinking together at the same time. Now during that first review, Keith was pretty clear about what his financial life needed to look like. We found his savings were pretty scattered around actually: a modest 15 grand in one old pension, a healthy 135,000 in his current workplace scheme because he'd worked for his current firm for donkeys, and a good chunk as well, £40,000 was tucked away in premium bonds. He also had a small cushion of £5,000 in cash, and he was on track to receive the full state pension at 68 because he was 45, remember. Now the ace in his hand was actually a defined benefit pension that was going to pay out £1,500 each year starting at 65, so a bit of a secure safety net. So in total what we were working with, well, he had 195,000 in his overall savings at the age of 45. Now we asked Keith what he would like as an income in retirement. It's a question we ask all clients, and it's one we asked them to think about really carefully. He suggested that £2,000 a month net throughout retirement would be sufficient. Now in some cases people think they'll have more in the earlier years and less in the later years. That's pretty common, but Keith was pretty set on saying no, just plan £2,000 a month throughout life. We might change that later on as we get to know him a little bit better and as he gets a bit older. When we started to build Keith's plan, we had to be very deliberate about our assumptions. We used a 2% inflation rate, for example, and that's in line with the government's long-term target. We also used a 4% investment return. Now this return was based on a medium risk level that suited Keith's comfort zone, and it aligned with the FCA's guidelines as well. Now we chose these numbers on purpose as a conservative estimate. We've been doing this for a long time, folks, and we know what you might be thinking at this point. You've probably heard about investment returns of 10% or more. If you're lucky, you might have even experienced that kind of return. So you're probably wondering why we're using a much more modest number. We're absolutely aware of what's possible, believe me, and we know some years are brilliant and others can be absolutely terrible. So when we're stress testing a plan, we deliberately under-egg the pudding, so to speak, using using conservative numbers to ensure your plan can survive almost any storm. If we build forecasts this way and can create a scenario which succeeds, then we and you can be very confident all will be well. Now, we can easily play around with the numbers to model various scenarios so you can see and feel what might be possible with a fair wind and sunny skies, as well as in stormy seas, and make the right spending and saving decisions as a result. Now, when we first showed this all to Keith, his jaw pretty much dropped to the floor. That big red section, that's what his eyes were drawn to, and it's probably the same with you. It shows a pretty scary reality. He could retire at 57, but using these particular assumptions, his money would run out by the time he was 73. So think about that. After a lifetime of saving, he'd have nothing left in his 70s. By the time he reached 90, he'd have had to have found £144,000 from somewhere else. It was a bit of a wake-up call, I have to say, and it was clear that his plan was on the collision course with disaster. Facing this really difficult situation, our team explored every possible option with Keith. So at the start of the conversation, I mentioned that Keith had some historical pensions from old jobs and he had a current workplace scheme, which actually had the bulk of his money in it. Well, his old skills were just a bit of a burden, really. His money was working against him actually and not for him. The charges were far too high for the features and investments on offer, and as such the returns were pretty disappointing, and his investments generally had no real connection with what he was trying to achieve. In addition, his workplace scheme, his current scheme, had quite a lot of money in it, but it wasn't being managed actively, and it allowed something called a partial transfer, which means the scheme can stay open but we can take the bulk of it out into something new, into better investment opportunities, whilst leaving £2,000 or £3,000 in that scheme, so he continues to get his employer's contributions and his own going into it, and he can do that again in the future as it mounts up. Overall, this was a problem that we had to solve though. What we wanted to do was really powerful, and it's often the gateway to better outcomes for most clients that come to us in the first place. Well, we brought all of his historic pensions together and we did that partial transfer from his existing workplace scheme, and we put all of that into a single modern pension plan, which gave him a really clear, more managed approach. It also unlocked some nice additional benefits and opportunities beyond just consolidation. In effect, we just gave him back real control. He could finally see his total pot in one place, bar a couple of £1,000s in his current workplace scheme, and it gave him a clear view of his future. But the greatest benefit was knowing that his money was finally aligned with his goals, giving him the peace of mind that every single bit of his investment strategy was now working tirelessly and effectively behind the scenes to help him retire at 57. So we had a great chat with Keith overall about his goals, but more importantly, we talked quite a bit about his attitude towards investment risk. In reality, he had taken a risk before by buying and converting the barn, because that might not have worked out. But of course, this is bricks and mortar, which he was already familiar with. What he didn't really have a clue about was what makes a good investment in our world. So we spent quite a bit of time talking to him about that, running through an investment risk questionnaire with some serious questions in there to make him think. And what we actually found out was that he was actually ready to be bold. He was a good earner, he had some cash set aside for emergencies and holidays, and so was really comfortable with a more ambitious approach with his pension investments. And it was a bit of a light bulb moment for his whole plan actually. With this new understanding, we modelled the effect of a 1% increase in the protected investment from 4% to 5%. Now, this analysis showed what a difference a slightly more growth-focused strategy could make over time. Even 1% difference can really matter. By looking at these different scenarios, you can better understand the potential impact of various investment choices on your long-term goals. And of course, our expectation over the long term is that good quality, well-researched, well-managed investments should deliver more than we assume, and with regular reviews and tweaks, we can keep striving for those additional wins as the investment world evolves. Now for the next option. This was actually one of the toughest conversations we had with Keith. His initial goal, as I've said, was to retire at 57, a date he had his heart set on. Really, he didn't want to retire any later than that for all the reasons I've already said. It was a goal he'd worked towards for years, really. Whilst he could technically do it, our analysis revealed a difficult reality. The lifestyle he wanted wouldn't be as secure as he would like. We had to be honest. We showed him that by working just 2 more years until 59, he could bridge that shortfall. One move to rule them all. Now that sacrifice now would turn his good plan into a great one, filling the financial gaps and giving him a powerful safety net for the rest of his retired life. It would give him the freedom to live without constant worry, enjoying the retirement he truly deserved. The most remarkable part of our conversation was when Keith saw the forecast on screen. The numbers laid it all out and the decision became crystal clear. It was a mindset change. Now, Keith didn't hate his job at all. He just had a clear timeline now in his head. And I suppose that's where we come in. We aren't here to tell you your dreams are impossible. We've actually preferred to tell you that they're real, but to show you what's truly achievable is our goal. So we helped him make his dream a reality, really, but a secure one, by taking a small detour. We helped him get as close to his goal as he possibly could, ensuring he gets the future he truly deserves. So if he had to, Keith agreed he'd work on. Of course, over the years, we'll be encouraging him to contribute more to his pensions and bridge that 2-year gap. And if we can achieve investment returns above the 5% we've used in the forecast, which of course is conservative, rewind and see that again if you want to, that again will shave months or even years off his current age 59 retirement plan. I just want to quickly walk you through a couple of the other options that we explored with Keith, because this part of the process is so important, because a financial plan has to fit your life. It's not the other way around. So for starters, we asked if he would contribute more to his pension, and of course more in, more out. But his honest reply was that with him losing his friends recently, he really wanted to make sure he and Sandra could live for today as much as possible. I mean, he was a man who worked hard and he wanted to keep the extra cash for the little trips away that he and Sandra loved to take every year. It's a completely understandable priority, and it's a perfect example of why the best plans aren't just about the numbers. They're about what truly matters to each and every one of you. Now let's talk a bit about downsizing. For Keith and Sandra, this option was actually a non-starter when we had a proper heart-to-heart about it. They were perfectly happy in the converted barn, and that security was priceless. They intended to stay there at least while Sandra's mum was still alive, and after that they would prefer to leave the property to the kids. So for Keith, the decision was clear. He chose to get bolder. He confidently accepted an increase in his investment risk approach and a 2-year delay in his retirement, knowing that these strategic moves would give him the freedom and security he truly deserved in the long run. Now for the moment of truth, let's go through the final results. As you can see on screen, Keith's previous deficit has completely disappeared and it's been replaced by a far more confident financial picture. By the time he reached his new retirement age of 59, his pension pot would grow to over $362,000, and we didn't just fix that problem, we gave him a surplus of over 34 grand by the time he reached 90, and of course this is all on 5% growth returns and 2% inflation. That was a stunning £178,689 turnaround that transformed his future from a source of worry and concern into one of comfort, confidence and freedom. So Keith wanted to retire early to spend more time with his loved ones, and why on earth not? But his initial plan faced a potential shortfall. By working together to explore his options, we helped him turn a potential problem into a strategic solution. A relatively small strategic adjustment to his plan, all thought about and decided about together, improved his long-term resilience, gave him greater confidence in the future. And if you'd like to chat with our team, click the link in the description to book your own free review to find out what's possible for your own plan. Now, if you're thinking about your own retirement, which I'm hoping you are, seeing as you're watching this, we want to help you move along the way. I think this next video actually might be quite interesting because it'll show you what is possible, even if you've just got £100,000 saved for retirement. Honestly, folks, it'll really help you. So click here. I'll see you there.